Hello guys, this is Aces here, and today I'm going to talk about evolution. So what is it? Is it just a scientific concept, or is it just a fairy tale? Now, before I answer this question, I would first like to define what is actually evolution, in order to avoid the ambiguity and confusion. Alright, so let's start with the definition. There are two types of evolution: microevolution and macroevolution. Microevolution involves genetic changes within the species' inheritance spectrum, whereas macroevolution involves genetic changes outside the inheritance spectrum. The former and the latter can best be described as the apple-orange analogy. When an apple is red or green, we call that microevolution, because the apple is still an apple, just similar appearances. This is quite equivalent with the horse fossil record. They're both big, small, and different in appearance, but still considered to be in the same horse inheritance. On the other hand, macroevolution involves increases of genetic information outside the species' inheritance spectrum. Just like the apple-orange analogy, the apple would evolve into an orange after millions of years. The principle of the apple evolving into an orange is known as macroevolution. In this argument, I will be focusing on macroevolution, not micro, because that's what Darwin's theory predicts. Darwin predicted that there should be many modifications of species gradually evolving from the simple to the complex into an entirely new class of species, like fish turning into mammal after millions and millions of years. Alright, so let's start with the strongest arguments for evolution. One of the strongest arguments for evolution is junk DNA. Evolutionists like to point out evidence for evolution in the non-functional DNA sequences that fit clearly with evolutionary theory, and that they can be easily explained as leftovers from our ancestors. Ironically, they're using the argument creationists commit: I don't know it, so X must exist. Evolutionists use the argument: I don't know what these non-functional sequences of DNA do. Oh my god, must be evolution. Richard Dawkins was one of the atheists who promoted evolution over junk pseudogenes. Now I'm going to provide 3 actual scientific studies in a description that illustrates the sheer ignorance of these evolutionists. The 3 studies demonstrates clearly that we actually theoretically use 100% of our DNA that was considered to be junk according to evolutionists. The junk DNA was once again considered to be evidence of leftovers from our ancestors. Now I'm gonna suggest that you look at those 3 studies, and you will be able to see that 90% of junk DNA that came from our ancestors, well, technically the 3 studies suggests that we actually theoretically use 100% of our DNA sequences. So basically there is no 50% genetic code with bananas, 80% with dogs, and 90% with apes. The fact that evolutionists assume junk DNA to be leftovers of ancestors as evidence for evolution is a complete embarrassment, and quite frankly an argument for ignorance. Now, the second argument that evolutionists like to point to is embryo retroviruses. Embryo retroviruses are seen in the eyes of the evolutionists to be evidence for evolution because they appear similar to apes. If ERVs were truly the result of evolution, then we should see no functional sequences for the retroviruses. Unfortunately, that evolutionary mumbo-jumbo doesn't stand up to the hype. If you look down on my studies, you can actually see that these embryo retroviruses actually have a function after all. For example, one published in PubMed conclude these data illustrate the potential of retroviruses sequences to regulate human transcription on a large scale consistent with a substantial effect of ERVs on the function and evolution of the human genome. Now, the second study also concludes, nevertheless, the presence of widespread ERV promoter activity in the human genome demonstrates that ERV, which is embryo retroviruses, sequences can maintain the ability to promote transcription for millions of years after initial insertion into the genome. In addition to the intergenic ERV promoters, there were 9,292 CAGE identified ERV promoters that initiate transcription within 1 kilobyte upstream or downstream of the previously characterized TSS of known human genes. 1,550 of these ERV CAGE tag cluster map to 5 UTRs consistent with transcription from previously characterized promoters, but the majority, 7,742, map just upstream of the 5 UTR in the proximal promoter region, or downstream within genes. Therefore, these ERV-derived promoters are likely to be responsible for generating alternative transcripts of human genes. Now, the final study, it's a simple conclusion. It concludes that endogenous, not embryo, retroviruses elements have been shown to contribute promoter sequences that can initiate transcription of adjacent human genes. Ouch. There goes another fatal gap for Darwinian evolution. Now, let's move on to the third argument for Darwinian evolution. The third argument for Darwinian evolution are the missing links. Darwin's worst nightmare. One of the greatest fears that made Charles Darwin anxious was the fact that he couldn't find any transitional links to justify his Darwinian evolution theory. He specifically stated himself in The Origin of Species, "The number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed on the earth must be truly enormous. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graded organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory." And that quote is from Charles Darwin himself in the book Origin of Species. Now, the fact that Darwin couldn't find the links, especially in the Cambrian explosion, gave him a big headache. Even to this day, the links are still even by the famous atheist paleontologists themselves. Here is one from Richard Dawkins, Oxford University. "We find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution. The very first time they appear, it is as though they were just planted there, without any evolution history." Now here's another one from Temple and Mode and Evolution, page 105. "This regular absence of transitional forms is not confined to mammals, but is an almost universal phenomenon, as has long been noted by paleontologists. It is true of almost all orders of all classes of animals, and it is apparently also true of analogous categories of plants." Now here's another one from The Meaning of Evolution, page 231. "It is thus possible to claim that such transitions are not recorded because they did not exist." The world-famous evolutionist and paleontologist Dr. Gaylord Simpson. Well, would you look at that? More fatal gaps for Darwinian evolution. Now, before I move on to the next argument, I would first like to clarify that the evolutionists of the fossils that they send me, they're actually ambiguous and quite frankly subjective at best. The fossils you see here of the horse family is one example. Evolutionists argue that since these horse fossils are evidence of evolution, it is therefore real. Now here's the problem. The fossils that you see here on the horses, they're not actually Darwinian evolution. If you look at them closely, you can see that they're still part of the same species of the horse. Now, if it was Darwinian evolution, then we should see the horse evolving into something else. For example, the saying that a fish can turn into a mammal, that's Darwinian evolution. But when you give me a fossil that is a bird changing to a bird, a crocodile changing to a crocodile, a horse changing to a horse, that's not evidence for Darwinian evolution. It's just evidence of subspeciation. But it is not even close for Darwinian evolution, and in no way proves that a fish can turn into a mammal or that a dinosaur can turn into a bird. There are also fossils that evolution is believed to be evidence for Darwinian evolution. But look what happened to Ida and Tiktaalik. Scientists thought that there were evidence of the missing links for Darwinian evolution. However, it turns out, I'll provide the scientific studies below, that it's not really a transitional fossil or a missing link to justify Darwinian evolution. Tiktaalik? What else? Opaki, African, what is it? Animal that has zebra legs? Oh my goodness. Now, down to the final death blow for Darwinian evolution. Punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium, or should I say, punctuated dispersion, is an ad hoc pseudoscientific hypothesis to explain away the missing links in the fossil record. This theory was created by I forgot his first name, but his last name starts with Gold. In science, a scientific hypothesis must possess two things: testability and falsification. How exactly do you test punctuated dispersion? Yeah, that's what it should be called now. If macroevolution, that evolutionist belief only happens millions of years. Simple answer: you can't. The fact that these eggheads elitists are doing pseudoscience by creating a non-falsifiable ad hoc hypothesis to save their evolutionary theory is very telling. It just proves how full of shit Darwinists really are with all the assumptions they made out of their asses, and how they promote punctuated equilibrium to save the theory from dying. Really ironic, considering that they're once putting their heads in the sand and ignore all the modern scientific publications against their theory. Yet many stupid people like Darwinists continue to support it, when really they're just setting themselves on fire and chasing a wild goose chase. I can't believe science is educating Darwinian evolution to the classes when scientists themselves, they can't even find complete indisputable evidence to document the existence for Darwinian evolution. Alright guys, well, this is Aces here, and this is the end of the presentation. And if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comment section before, and if you agree with me, please leave a thumbs up. And for all the crazy evolution and eggheads elitists that want to defend their bullshit, putting their hands on the sand, you know, if you're just going to sit there and throwing me insults, you know what, it's better for you not to even type on the keyboard and send me criticism, because it's not gonna work. If you want to argue with me, send me some legitimate reasons, arguments to defend Darwinian evolution. But if you're just gonna sit there throwing me insults that don't even bother, because you're just shooting yourself at the leg, I don't have time to spend retards. I want legitimate arguments and evidence that shows the existence of Darwinian evolution. And now, until I see that evidence, I will be convinced. But so far, the evidence for Darwinian evolution is very lacking. Alright guys, well, this is Aces here, and thanks for watching.